Welcome back, everyone, and to Mark, welcome to Africa. Since becoming Chief Content Officer in 2018, Mark has been responsible for leading all aspects of Skillsoft's content catalog, including its strategic direction, roadmap, and development. And we can't wait to hear how global megatrends are likely to impact Africa. Omri Yari from LRMG will be moderating the Q&A with Mark post that presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon and looking forward to today's section. Why don't we go ahead? I'm going to go ahead and share some slides for our session today, and really cover what we feel to be a very transformative and compelling topic. Now I want this to again, as we go through the conversation today and review some of these concepts, I'd like to extend the opportunity for those that have questions or comments or things the questions they'd like to ask. Feel free to go ahead and chat those in the chat here in Zoom, and we'll do our best to stop and address those questions as they come. And just know that we'll also have a 15 Q&A segment here at the end to address any comments and questions that come up. So as we kind of sit in today in 2023, the world of ed tech has certainly continued to evolve and shift and change, and certainly as we've come out the other side of the pandemic, we've seen kind of ed tech and this notion of digital learning really take shape and take form like no other time in history. And even as we kind of talk about this notion of workforce transformation, certainly in what are uncertain economic times, certainly the need and the long-term prospects of this notion of investing in the skilling and development of your workforce has never been more relevant. And some comments that really kind of underscore that is that while certainly we live in a very kind of uncertain time, these pervasive demands for skills have never been more apparent. And I've just actually pulled some specific quotes from Bersin and Fosway and others, and I think that kind of illustrates some of the perspectives around the topic. I think Josh had one really kind of interesting point that he made in December as he was looking into 2023, which was that as we exit the pandemic and industries and organizations and enterprises continue to merge, virtually every company will feel threatened by some disruptor. And so the need to continue to transform and kind of digitally evolve will continue to be a main focus, right? And certainly while there is disruption in tech and we certainly have uncertainty in kind of the financial sectors, particularly here in North America, this need for continued reskilling, the need for technology enabled and digitally ready talent has never been more apparent. One other comment here by the Fosway group, which I always found really interesting, from David Paring, is that while the need for upskilling and reskilling is so critical, historically the learning and development teams have not been the organizations that have been historically been looked upon to deliver on this. And we typically find that too, that when we meet with many customers and the people that we work with every day, in many cases, it's the technology teams, it's the transformation offices that are being looked at and looked after to actually lead a lot of the transformation efforts. But having said that, as we sit within the current times and economic challenges and headwinds that we observe in the market today, we're going to expect that learning and development will be asked to take on more in the transformation and agenda, and actually helping organizations become more digitally ready, digitally enabled, to be able to use technology for learning in ways that have never been, maybe have never been fully utilized in the past. The next quote here from Forrester, Katie Tynan, I really like too, in that, she kind of acknowledges that while we may be headed towards some type of economic constraint, it will be perplexing to many employers because the labor market will continue to be equally as tight. And we kind of see that, right? We actually, while certainly there's economic uncertainty, we see that the global economy continues to generate jobs kind of, quarter on quarter, month on month. And we see that the technology resources that were constrained, in 2020, 2021, and 2022 seem to continue to be, constrained. We still need data scientists. We still need cloud engineers. We still need Scrum masters and so forth to kind of, marshal the resources of the enterprise and ensure that we're kind of building, products and features that really help enable, the future growth of the organization. And then finally, I like this quote from the Brandon Hall Group, that historically they've observed that while organizations may have maybe planned for, maybe the next 6 months, maybe 12, maybe 18 months, right now, virtually every organization is looking to be more agile. They're looking to sense and respond. We work with companies that have had just wonderfully developed and comprehensive, 18 to 24 talent projections and talent pipelines, and they kind of use that as a barometer and a metric for not only their recruiting but their skill development. What we see today is that those 18 to 24 month kind of pipelines have now become really kind of 90-day roadmaps. People are looking to know month on month, if not week on week, how their organization is staffed, what skills do they currently have, where the gaps are, so they can continue to sense and respond and actually build that agility natively into the workforce. But really what we're going to explore here for the next 20, 25 minutes is really just a point of view and a perspective on how to achieve kind of skill transformation at scale. We're going to lay out a basic 6-step framework and process that we use at Skillsoft. We're going to actually better define what we view skill transformation to be. And we're just going to talk about some real pragmatic ways in which those things can be measured in a blueprint for how you can think about it in your own organizations. One thing that we would just observe, and when this actually came out in our IT skills and salary report, is, not surprisingly, in a world where technology talent continues to be, extremely constrained and scarce, one of the best things most organizations can do is just to invest in the skill development of their talent. It's often been found that organizations that invest in skill development, that invest in the certification of their employees, that give them meaningful career development and skill development opportunities, generally retain their people longer, and are much happier and more fulfilled in their job roles than those that don't invest in skill development. And so, in a world where, I know as L&D professionals, people are always challenged to provide the ROI measures and what the real return is for the learning investment. In many cases, it's very much self-evident. When you look at the cohort of those that actually receive skill development, that have the ability to get, recertified, to actually build credentials and badges, they are generally going to be more engaged in the day-to-day operations of their job role. They're going to see the long-term, career opportunities with their employer that they have. And ultimately, that's going to pay back a return for not only the individual, but it's also going to, allow the employer and the organization to grow with that individual. And we think that that's why this is very much kind of a self-evident, investment thesis and ROI. Which I know most people as learning and development professionals generally, agree with. But having said that, what does skill transformation really look like? And so we do a lot of work with World Economic Forum. I actually sit on the Future Skills Alliance with World Economic Forum. And one of the principal pieces of research that WEF publishes is the Job Outlook Report. One of the most recent ones was published in 2020. Then more recently, in just February, they actually went through a full update of that. And one of the principal findings, when you think about where are the job growth roles in the global economy and where are the growth skills, there's kind of an interesting dynamic. So typically the way the survey works is it will go out, WEF will actually survey its member constituents and some additional stakeholders. And they'll ask a whole series of questions, right? But two of the most interesting questions is, over the next 5 years, where do you see the growth roles in your organization? And not surprisingly, when they put that question to the members of the constituency and the survey respondents, not surprisingly, 8 of the top 10 roles are actually technology roles. They're things that you would expect: big data, AI, machine learning, cybersecurity. But when you ask those same organizations, what are the top 10 skills that are going to be in demand, and you ask them to go through the same kind of rank order exercise, 8 of the top 10 skills are actually human skills. They're power skills. They're critical thinking, their resilience, their communication and leadership and stress tolerance. And so really what we see here is a really interesting and compelling intersection of not only the need for technology growth and technology roles, but really the things that illustrate and generate value for an enterprise are the human skills. They're the cognitive skills, emotional intelligence, and things that allow you to have an organization work better together and take full advantage of the capabilities that these technologies provide. And so as we look at 2023, we really see at the intersection of these two things: the technical skills, the hard skills that people need to perform the roles of kind of the next generation of work. At the same point in time, kind of a return to basics in terms of the human skills and power skills that they need to be successful and generate value from those technologies. Now, having said that, while it can be easily stated that, hey, those are the two domains of kind of roles and skills, the thing that historically has been less clear is all the different learning solutions that exist to actually serve those needs. And so, while certainly we've made dramatic progress as an industry in education technology and continuing, to develop solutions and bring skill transformation at scale to, the broader enterprise and the broader workforce, the amount of solutions has not gotten any simpler, right? And this is just a very simple matrix that we've used in some of our research, which actually plot basically learning interventions or learning solutions on the x-axis, and on the y-axis you actually have the criticality of the skill out. And so one way to look at this is to say, okay, for kind of lower criticality things that are mainly performance support, a lot of these on-the-job training, micro learning, learning in the flow are typically suited for that. But as you move up the criticality level and get to mission critical projects like cloud migration, data projects, cybersecurity initiatives, and network, infrastructure, hardening and cybersecurity, programs. Typically, that's where you start to go to higher stakes curricula, things that are more virtual classes and boot camps, and even experiential learning and mentoring. Now, the messy truth in all this is no learning organization is conveniently plotted on any particular part of this chart, right? Most learning organizations, most enterprises are always oscillating between any particular point on this chart. And you actually may find individual learners have some components of what they do are really mission critical projects, but other things are more kind of learning in the moment of need. And so the question is, how do you set up and how do you think about skill transformation that helps you accommodate all these different programs at scale and really helps you enable that skill transformation ability. And so what we fundamentally laid out here is just a basic 6-step process and skilling framework to kind of think about this. Now, not surprisingly, our products at Skillsoft, our Percipio platform, our content libraries, our services, our customer success motions are overlaid against this 6-step process. And many of you will probably look at this and see it and say, okay, well, this looks very similar like a typical waterfall model. I would encourage people to think about this 6-step process as really a continuous cycle, and a way to really kind of think about how you prioritize skills, how you develop skills, and ultimately how you transform into those things. But maybe just to lay out the basic domains of the process, the first step in any type of skill transformation is to really prioritize what are the top skills for your enterprise. And in many cases, those can be laid out by the strategy of the business. Many organizations may have very simply stated ambitions as an organization. They want to do X% of their business virtually or online. They want to migrate maybe X% of their customer base to a fully digital motion. They may have a desire that they want to have X% of their work processes in the cloud. All those things, are strategic priorities, right? That generally have a time scale, but they also have skill requirements for those, right? We've actually built a system of skill frameworks and learning taxonomies to support those strategic ambitions that we call Aspire, right? It's about a system of learning journeys that are about 120 or so job roles. And not surprisingly, they correspond to some of the different roles that we saw from World Economic Forum: data science, cybersecurity, cloud, and even human roles, right? Leadership, new leader onboarding, even design thinking and digital marketing. But really what this taxonomy and system of learning journeys allows you to do at scale is actually connect those to the strategy of your business. And so generally that's always going to be the first step on the process, just basically, prioritizing what those skill requirements are, and really trying to attach some business value to them. But no sooner do you actually lay out that taxonomy and those system of learning journeys that you need to benchmark where people are at. We built a system of nano assessments and really quick micro learning recommendations that allow you to benchmark the workforce against up to 600 different skill domains. Those skill domains actually correlate back to the learning journeys that we established in the taxonomy, and they provide a quick point of view on whether someone's a novice, whether they're kind of having intermediate knowledge or developing their knowledge, and whether or not they have mastery of that topic. And so really, this notion of being able to curate a skill benchmark against a system of learning journeys and a skill taxonomy is really what allows you to direct people to the right things, right? And allows you to basically get an index on where people sit today. And we'll talk about some of the visualizations that come out of that. And it's not that skill benchmarks or assessments haven't historically existed in the market. There are many assessment tools that in many cases are even older than EdTech. The challenge is that historically benchmarks and assessments have not integrated or communicated really well with other kind of content modalities. So there's a lot of pressure on learning organizations to try to stitch those things together. What we've created with these benchmarks is, very small 10 to 15 question assessments that maybe take 5 to 7 minutes to complete. And they can be stacked, they can be coupled in such a way that gives you kind of a descriptive view of where your workforce is today. But ultimately, it's those two things, your taxonomy and your benchmark, that ultimately lead to direct someone into skill development. And skill development can range from kind of traditional self-study e-learning courses. Again, we have a library of off-the-shelf curriculum. They're anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes in length, micro courses, or full-out learning journeys that may actually be, in some cases, 45 or 50 hours of instruction that span multiple domains in a job role, like a data scientist. Or they can be digital learning labs, right? They can actually be things where hands-on, you start to code and develop software. For example, we acquired Codecademy last year, which gives us really the ability for people to get hands-on with web dev inside of real IDE and help them get real-time experience. But it can also be instructor-led. It can be cohort-based training. It certainly can be, even mentoring and coaching. But we look at kind of that skill development, being able to recommend people into the right learning programs at scale as being critical in actually setting a program up for success. But historically, it's not necessarily the first three things that give organizations and L&D professionals the most challenge. There are many organizations that generally have a pretty good benchmark of the skills that their organizations need to focus on, where they sit today, at least at some level, and have actually stood up learning programs. Really, the challenges start to kick in the back half of this chart when you think about skills engagement, skill transfer, and kind of the ROI analytics. When we think about skill engagement, one of the most basic questions that most learners have is, where do they go next? Where do they go first? How do they know if they're progressing? How are they encouraged to stay on track? We've actually built a system of digital credentials into the product, so that every person that completes 35 to 45 minute instructional module gets a digital badge, right? And this notion of a stacked badge model, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, allows you to kind of stack badges at a very micro level, which ultimately improves the completion rate. We found that our completion rate on our content is somewhere between 30 or 40% above the industry norm in this space. And most importantly, it allows you to take those digital credentials and actually stack them into learning path level badges or entire learning journey badges. So for example, if we think about a data scientist, maybe their first step in that journey is to understand what data science is. How does structured data differ from non-structured data? What is big data? Well, you can earn digital badges in those very simple courses, right? And then as you kind of work your way up, you can be certified as a data wrangler or a data ops specialist, right? Those would be track or role level badges, right? That are higher order than the course level badge. And then ultimately, as someone completes their data ops and data wrangler track, then they can actually move on and become a full data scientist in that highest order badge. So it really is that stacked credentialing that encourages people to move forward, encourages them to complete the training, encourages them to stay on track. But then finally, you have to ensure that things actually transfer back on the job, right? And that's typically where we have cohort-based learning available. We make collaborative learning with integrations with Microsoft Teams. We have a full digital coaching network that we make available with over 350 certified coaches, so that as people come out of training, as they pick up new skills, such in leadership development and actually leading teams, they can interact with a coach over 6 months to figure out how to apply those new things on the job. And even the application itself will actually issue reminders and flashcards to take them back to the training that was actually put out there. And then finally, as we move on to the last phase, is actually analyzing all the information that comes out of that. And this is typically where you get into the ROI piece, right? Now, what we've actually developed inside of our skill benchmarks are just the basic kind of before and after, right? So you can take the same skill benchmarks that are correlated to your taxonomy, and you can test someone before training, come back a month later, test them after training. And at scale, you can see where the skill transformation has occurred, right? Both, not only in an organization and enterprise level, but even down to an individual and even a job role level, to see how things are progressing. We work with organizations to attach measures to that. So even inside these 3 phases of engagement, transfer, and analytics, we'll actually build up services and programs that support that. And then certainly work with our stakeholders to actually attach their own business measures to that. So they have a simple way to communicate that to their stakeholders. But, a more fundamental question then emerges. So if we buy off that there's kind of 6 steps in this process, which are fairly intuitive. The next question is, what does skill transformation really look like? How does that manifest? And I think when we see it, when we survey our own customers, we generally see skill transformation kind of coalesce into 5 different categories. And those really kind of come into think onboarding, bringing new people into your organization. That can actually include train to hire. We're actually starting to see more and more organizations ask for, to train people up just to be candidates for employment. So, for example, we work with one retailer that if someone comes into the job role and they're not a fit, they don't have the skills and credentials, we can actually refer them to an Aspire learning journey so they can actually get those skills, they can get those digital badges so they can actually become a candidate. And then once they're hired, we can actually put them through either onboarding for kind of corporate and company level, perspectives, or actually onboard specific roles like engineers and so forth. Now that differs obviously from upskilling and reskilling. Upskilling could be around a particular theme, things like data, agile, customer service, can even be technical literacy. We see a lot more of that, like just educating folks across the entire organization and things like, what is data science? What is Internet of Things? What is digital marketing, right? That's a very common upskilling scenario. And then we get into things like reskilling, and this is more of like end-to-end skill transformation. This may be taking somebody that's historically in a back office role and actually getting them to be a project manager or project coordinator. It could actually be certifying someone in kind of the latest technology, taking a network engineer, right, that maybe has only worked in on-premise hardware and actually getting them certified in the cloud, like in AWS or Azure, right? And those typically are the reskilling scenarios that we typically see. They generally can be around a certification or a credential. But then the 2 bottom ones are the things that most L&D professionals are very familiar with, things like leadership development, first-time manager, core leadership capability, and then performance and culture like ES&G and code of conduct and harassment awareness are also common areas. But generally, we see these 5 different groups of skill transformation, being, overlaid into the 6-step process that we looked at before. This gives a point of view of kind of our skill taxonomy that's both kind of enterprise critical technology skills and then future critical functional skills. These try to look in 2 different domains where, if we look at the critical technology skills, it's the things you'd expect. It's cloud, cyber, data, web dev. When we think about future critical functional skills, it's things like, things are actually becoming more technical, right? Like things like project management, agile. It can also be digital marketing, it can be design thinking. But you can see here, we've actually also created out an entire stack on, human skills, on leadership, on resilience, and so forth. And you can see how this actually facilitates into a career journey. If we take some of those roles that we saw on the previous slide, and I talked about this notion of the stacked badge model, you can see this is actually for a product we call a career journey, and this is a path around cybersecurity. Here you can see we've actually taken the novice level and we actually put them into generalist products on cyber foundations or cyber generalists. They can move into more specialized credentials like, Stack Master, ethical hacking, move into more expert certifications like CISM, CISA, right? Now, this same type of career journey can then be applied to other domains, whether it's cloud, even leadership, first-time manager. But this notion of actually taking the skill domains and actually arranging them into a career path are the things that generally inspire learners to continue with the program. And by the way, when you sit down with your corporate stakeholders, you can say, well, these are how many people have actually progressed to the expert level. And this is typically how we see this progressing and playing out in kind of the modern environment. I'll just throw this up. This is actually some research that was taken from our Lean Into Learning report that's available at skillsoft.com. We actually track where the trending learning journeys are kind of year on year. And you can see in 2021, not surprisingly, virtual work in the new normal was one of the top leadership journeys, right? As were things like product management, certainly Python, Agile. But look, when we look back at 2022, look how much first-time managers come up the ranks, as has the leadership development journey. We are starting to see more and more demand for just those basic leadership skills, helping people work better together. And as we look into 2023, we're going to continue to see really the return to basics around things like communication, emotional intelligence, how to actually deliver and receive feedback. When you think about what's transpired in the world over the past few years, we have an entire generation of leaders that have come into leadership roles that may have never received any formal leadership training. By the way, they're leading in very unique times that can be distributed. They can be, very much, hybrid roles, or some people are in the office, some people are still virtual. You're dealing with multiple time zones. And how do you actually preserve that culture? How do you preserve that identity, in a world that continues to be virtualized and distributed? Again, the need for leadership skills, has never been more important in this environment, and the data shows that. But this is how we think about it when we kind of stack up those leadership skills, going from core professional all the way up to leadership development. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but this just shows how we think about it. Generally, on the front line, you have those core professional skills, which align different competencies that your organization may use as part of the performance life cycle, maybe as part of recruiting. In many cases, people are actually transitioning to more skill frameworks to support that. But they also include those mission critical programs like DEI, mental health and wellness, even code of conduct, harassment awareness. Those are generally the things that the frontline workforce sees at scale. But then we move into things like future skills, which get into the Aspire journeys we looked at in the previous page, things like design thinking, product marketing, agile practice, and then ultimately leading up to leadership development, where we build leadership, full out leadership capabilities. We have about 30 or so leadership competencies that organizations generally curate from and partner with Sloan Management Review and partner with and actually leverage our coaching practice to help, enable those journeys full form. Ultimately, the way we see organizations implementing this is through leadership maturity models, right? This is an example of one that we've created. If you remember on our previous slide, when we were looking at trending Aspire journeys, you could see how first-time manager was one of the trending journeys. You can see the competencies that align there around developing people, accountability, and execution. Then we can see at the mid-level, we get into influence, persuasion, and collaboration. We can then also see kind of strategic, thinking and culture and leading through disruption as kind of the higher order leadership capabilities. But most organizations arrange their leadership disciplines, their leadership competencies into this type of framework so they can demonstrate how people are actually moving through through that entire continuum. This just shows again how we think about how you blend these modalities, because the next question is once you have a framework, how do you actually arrange the modalities to actually bring people up to mastery? Again, on-demand courses are generally pretty good for driving people to competency and generating awareness and literacy. But usually if you want people to get to that competency proficiency level, they need to get hands-on. They need to actually practice. On the technology side, we have an entire library of digital labs. Again, I mentioned Codecademy previously, where you can get hands-on with the software. But even in leadership, we actually look at cohort interactions. We look at programs and coaching to actually bring people together as a way to drive that proficiency. And then at mastery level, generally you need people in kind of that cohort-based program so they can ask questions from their mentor, from their instructor, from their coaches that actually enable that. As we kind of think about this kind of fuller form, this shows out an example of what this actually looks like in practice. And so you can see here in this particular example, we've actually laid out a set of learning assets and curriculum. You know, if you think about it, you know, competency, you think about self-study courses, even digital books. As people move up to proficiency, things like hands-on practice labs and even, you know, test preps and exam prep to test their knowledge. You know, maybe even interacting with a mentor will get somebody to proficiency. And then as we think about mastery, we think about, you know, instructor-led programs and even, you know, kind of on-demand, you know, coaching and mentoring as a way to kind of further establish that. And that's just a way in which we kind of organize the previous chart where we're taking someone from kind of awareness all the way up to mastery. This gives you an example of how we think about that curriculum. Most organizations are going to assemble that into kind of a week by week type of experience. We talked a little bit about measurements earlier. This gives an example of how we think about our skill benchmarks. I mentioned these were nano assessments. You can see this Python benchmark is about 20 questions, takes about 5 to 7 minutes to complete. And ultimately what this comes back with is a numerical score of where somebody sits in this proficiency range. You know, in this example, this person scored a 68, so they're still developing, they're not yet proficient. And based on that skill level, they get a recommendation of micro-learning videos. They'll actually get full out courses, maybe 20 to 90 minutes in length. And then if they want to sit for a full Aspire journey, they can get recommended into that as well. In this case, it's going into the Pythonista journey, right? Where we take someone from a novice Python developer into becoming more of a certified expert, and then also recommended into labs. Now, what's typically powerful about this kind of diagnostic capability, and these are just some examples of what the assessments actually really look like. You know, you can actually see that how we actually recognize, you know, some of the different skill profiles at scale and how we actually measure that. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen, excuse me, left-hand side of the screen, you can see the individual learner and skill gain dashboards. You can see month on month how the skills are actually progressing. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can actually see how multiple benchmarks or multiple skill levels stack up. And you can see how novice, developing, and proficient levels, you know, actually, actually build up to what a composite score would actually look like. And then if we look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the actual skill progression over time and actually chart out how those skills are evolving. But it's these type of measures that generally start to really resonate with business stakeholders, as well as the digital badges and credentials that people typically earn. This gives an example of how we think about you know, digital badges. This gives one example of how we've actually created a stack badge model. I mentioned course completion. These are typically 35 to 45 minutes of seat time. You can take multiple courses and those will stack up into an entire track, right? And actually enable track completion. In this case, it's a DevOps lead, right? So that actually aligns to a role. And then if someone actually creates and completes an entire Aspire journey by virtue of passing their assessments, they can become an enterprise developer in their DevOps journey, which actually results in this DevOps completion. I will say too, another very powerful capability is that out of the box, we realize that not all these things, you know, may work for the broader enterprise. So we actually our customers to customize those. And that's actually where we see many organizations embracing and creating their own digital credentials, their own badge. And what's neat about badges is they actually last someone's entire work life, their entire job career, whether or not they're on Percipio, whether or not they continue to be with their current employer. Those badges are actually hosted by Accreditable. They're actually a digitally encrypted blockchain credential, so they can be downloaded to an Apple Wallet. They can actually be shared through a LinkedIn profile, you know, shared via Twitter. So these are enormous, you know, points of motivation for learners today. And we always encourage people to think carefully about how they're actually going to leverage credentials as part of that. So now I know we're running up on time, and I certainly want to leave, you know, 5 to 10 minutes for questions. As you think about the path forward and as you think about how to achieve skill transformation, you know, in your respective organizations, we typically advise customers to think about 3 things. You know, number one, you know, define what your framework is, define the things that are truly priorities for your organization, and make sure you have the discussions with your business stakeholders, with your executive teams. There should really be a clear line of sight between the skill priorities, the job paths, the roles that you're creating and you're investing in, to what the business priorities are for your organizations. It's expressed in very simple strategic, you know, business terms. And we always advise people to start there. Next, really then to think about how do you actually curate your actual journey from there. So once you've actually designed kind of and defined what those skill priorities are, then really spend time curating what that journey looks like. How much time do you want people to actually invest in this? You know, what's a reasonable expectations? And then really align your rewards and incentives around that. Offer credentials that show kind of that meaningful skill transformation, that allow them to kind of build those capabilities early and often. And so show that they can actually progress, you know, along their own path. And if you give the individual the opportunity to grow, you'll find that the organization will also, and the enterprise will grow right along with them. It really is just providing those kind of, you know, mutual opportunities through credentialing, through badging, to enable that. We've seen organizations actually align, you know, their total rewards and other incentive packages around that. So with all that said, I know we've got 10 minutes left. I'll open it up for questions in the Q&A. It's been an honor to be here this afternoon. If you'd like to post your questions in the panel in the Q&A, you know, happy to answer them.
Thanks for a really insightful presentation, Mark. It's great to get a global perspective on the shifting landscape of learning and development, and really the emphasis around transforming skills and learning just in time in a more purposeful manner than just in case learning that would have happened in the past. So it's nice to see L&D back at the forefront of the conversation and really pivotal to those strategic conversations. We got one question so far from Michelle, which I think a broader perspective is that a common anxiety amongst L&D professionals in this heavily laden IT landscape and IT skills transformation space is just the complexity of the skill sets in that world. Michelle asked about Pythonista in general and what that means, but add to that Selenium and Cucumber and DevOps and Python and Azure and all of those. What advice do you have for professionals to engage a CIO level stakeholder on a skills plan and framework for their audience while maintaining a goal objective?
Right. I think the first piece of advice that I would provide is, number one, stay grounded in what the true needs and measures and requirements are of the business, right? I would actually start there. And generally, if you're sitting down with a CIO or a CTO, they're going to have a roadmap for the year that's going to be based on not necessarily purely on technology, but on what are the actual strategic needs, what are the strategic ambitions and goals and OKRs for the business itself. And so I would actually start the discussion there. And again, if the desire is to X% of your incoming business or your commerce and actually make that digital, well, what are the skills that are really required to enable that, right? And once you actually get into the skill discussion, then what I would suggest doing is actually work with a skill framework. Again, we have one that we call Aspire. You know, something like Python, so that's basically someone that's you know a journey, you know, basically someone that's competent and proficient in Python and using that from a data and analytics perspective that will be recognizable to your CIO and CTO. I would suggest using an off-the-shelf framework to start that discussion, and I would not let you know, perfect be the enemy of progress, right? It's more important to be able to sit down and have the discussion and lay out those target job roles and ask them to prioritize that, but just be sure to anchor it in the objectives of the business. There's nothing worse. I can just, having lived through this and having advised many customers over the years, there's nothing worse than showing up to a learning program that never had like a North Star, never was anchored in the strategy of the business to begin with, because it's very difficult to unravel it once it gets going. Start with what your business drivers are, make sure you have a one-to-one relationship between your OKRs for your ELT, and start the discussion there in your measure.
Smart. We're also getting a bit of feedback regarding particularly that topic. You know, skills frameworks, how are they different to traditional competency frameworks, which in our experience have been quite cumbersome to implement and follow, and maybe too granular to actually be practical? How are Aspire journeys different?
Yeah, it's a great point, and there's a lot of discussion on this topic. You know, how are competencies and our KPIs different from skills, right? I would just suggest that I think skills are a little bit descriptive. They actually have kind of an outcome, versus competencies kind of are more of they kind of describe an attribute or behavior. I think skills are far more actionable. Skills are typically what you're going to see in job descriptions. Skills can be measured, can be valued, they can be indexed. And that's why you're finding most modern talent platforms are really starting to index around skills as a thing. It's not only for learning, but it's how organizations are thinking about succession planning. It's how they're thinking about even compensation. It's thinking about total rewards. So they're generally becoming the inventory that are kind of driving the modern kind of people operations process. And so that's how I typically, think about skills. Now, there's a whole host of different frameworks that are out on the market today, right? We would like CAST, but there's literally, many other providers, whether it's Eightfold, Skyhive, and so on. I think the first thing I would just suggest is it can be very overwhelming to start looking at taxonomies and evaluating things. I would start with something that's more of an ontology system of career paths and journeys, and start there and try to correlate that to what your learning requirements are.
Stunning. I think, have you seen maybe a change in the approach in leading organizations away from the old annual performance development plan discussion or individual development plan to being something more agile and dynamic as they progress through the year?
Yeah, it's interesting. As I said kind of early on in the previous in some of the previous slides, in a world where people had 18 to 24 month skill roadmaps and skill transformation plans, today people are indexing 30, 90 days. And you've seen performance management actually move that way as well. People are typically getting real-time performance feedback as deliverables are actually created and actually promoted. When you think about a typical Scrum, it's 2 weeks, 14 days. And so why shouldn't the performance measurements be anchored in that same cadence, right? I know it's not typically how people think about things, but really we're starting to see kind of performance and skill evaluation being indexed around the natural flow of work versus kind of an arbitrary kind of calendar time. That said, we have also seen organizations really start to embrace OKRs, and we've seen that their performance and skill development cycles have been anchored around that 90-day cycle as well. So but yeah, absolutely, it's becoming kind of the centerpiece for a lot of things.
Maybe just to close out, Mark, how do we better partner with line managers who are closer to the struggle and performance objectives of the organizations and connecting them to the learning and paths that are available?
Yeah, it's a great question. We find in any type of skill transformation or learning program, it really comes down to those frontline leaders. If the frontline leaders find the value and if they embrace it, it's going to be a success. If they don't get behind it, there's almost nothing you can do, right? I would say the first thing you really need to do to get the front lines really excited about this is show them how they advance in their career, and not just currently today in your organization. If they believe that they're going to have a credential that's of value, if it's something they can share in their professional credential and their CV long term, who wouldn't want to invest in that? We actually are having a lot of really interesting discussions right now with organizations that range from kind of frontline healthcare groups to frontline service and hospitality groups to even transportation and distribution and logistics companies, right? And it's around things you might not expect. How do you take someone that's a driver today of a true bus, and can they be on a path to actually become an operations manager, right? Or even actually becoming certified in things like cloud or cybersecurity. And that can actually be a part of kind of your total rewards discussion, rather than just competing on like $1 an hour type of wage position. Why not put skill transformation into that equation as well? I can guarantee you that a frontline job opportunity is going to be more attractive for someone if they can believe that they can get long-term professional development out of it, a real hard skill coming out the other side of that, than one that does not. And I think that's really the power of what we do today.
Thank you, Mark. Excited about the developments that are coming and taking some of the heavy lifting away from L&D teams who have been busy curating to the most granular detail, something which you can deploy and allow for self-directed learning within a very complex environment. Thank you for sharing today.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure, Omri. Thank you so much for making the time. And I hope everyone got value out of this as well. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions. and enjoy the summit. I think it's a great opportunity to share knowledge and really, get skilled up in a lot of the prevailing kind of thoughts. So thank you to LRMG for hosting this. It's a great opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that. Definitely extracting maximum value there. And Omri, thanks so much for managing that conversation as well. It certainly was an insightful 45 minutes there, giving us much food for thought as we take another 15-minute booth time break. We'll see you back at 4:45 for our dynamic panel discussion moderated by Linda van der Loo. The topic, IT and HR, a digital handshake between talent and IT leaders.